Good morning. Good to see everybody today. The first Sunday of the new year. It's a great day to be together, period. Whether it's the first or the last Sunday or in the middle, it's always a good day to be together. If you would turn with me to number 514, if you want to use your book. The Glory Land Way, we'll sing the first and third verses, and then we will go to our classes. Hello, Miss Lundy. She was pointing at me. Hello, Miss Lundy. How are you? Yeah. 514, the Glory Land Way. I'm in the way, the bright and shining way. I'm in the glory land way. Telling the world that Jesus saves today. Yes, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. Onward I go, rejoicing in His love. I'm in the glory land way. Soon I shall see Him in that home above. Oh, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. You may go to your classes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have everybody here with us today on this first day of the week. We're going to be in James, of course, still continuing our book of James, James 1, we're verses 19 through 21. And, you know, you look at the subject and you think about a new year and you go, really? We got to deal with anger? And, you know, we see this, the importance behind it. James is going to talk to us about this, inspired by God, of course, the things that he writes. That he was writing, of course, to the 12 tribes scattered throughout, meaning all the churches, those Jewish Christians, and also all of us today, even today at this time. And we know that this is a subject that we can all deal with, that we understand that goes on throughout the world, and didn't just happen in the first century, happens in the 21st century also. And we know that the anger here is going to be interesting as James talks about it. He's not going to talk about a righteous anger like Jesus had when he was running all the money changers out of the temple and so on. That was, Jesus was able to be angry without sinning is what we see there. And as we go through this, we understand James is actually speaking about an anger that we need to try to depart from, that we don't want to be a part of, and move it out the best we can. And we know that sometimes it's difficult as human beings. We're going to get angry. Things are going to happen. But the main thing is that we don't stay that way. We learn to build on it and work on it throughout our life as we go through this. So as we deal with this, dealing with anger while remaining faithful, that's the big part about it. How do you deal with anger while remaining faithful as a Christian? And so we'll go ahead and read James 1. Let's go and start with that. If someone read James 1, 19 through 21 with us, please.
So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls.
Thank you. So as we look at this, we understand this wrath is anger is what he's speaking of here. And we look to it. So James is going to teach, as we stated, how to deal with this. And I think it is important to point out that anger basically takes on two forms in, I guess you'd say, in our personality. And it's only these two. And someone say, really? There's not a whole lot of different angers? So I mean, it's going to happen one of these two ways. And sometimes it happens both, you know, as we see with different people, depending on the way they are. And we know the first one way is displayed, of course, with anger, is an angry outburst. You know, just screaming, yelling, mad. You know, as we know, this is seen of probably slamming or throwing things, or, you know, intimidating others. I mean, that's one of the angers that we see of the two that we deal with. And these display of anger are obvious. They're clear. When we see them, we know very quickly that somebody is angry. But there's also another way to show anger. And some people don't think it's anger because they think, if I just remain quiet and everything's okay. No, it's not. There is a sulking and a quietness. And we all see this picture back here, and we understand that with a child, you know, being like that. And we see that happening. You may have raised a child that way, you know, not you raised them that way to be like that, but you raised them and that's how they were. And we say, well, it's not only children, even adults are like this. This happens. And we think, well, if I'm just sulking and quiet my own way, not even talk to them, even though they want me to, I'm just going to be angry inside. That's still anger. That's showing angerness. And this is still the thing that we find that James is talking about. So we show our anger as we see this area here, knowing that when you do this, it's kind of like removing ourselves from the presence of the intention of communicating our anger. Some say, well, Ernie, if I had an angry outburst, I'd rather be quiet about it. And no, I understand that, but we want to learn how to deal with both of them, just how to deal with it and get anger away from us very quickly and what is found there within it. So as we look at this base of, you know, these behaviors, either one of these behaviors, as we see, definitely is, as we would say, anger. And it's an anger that is there, that is out, you know, out of itself, was crazy. So we want to be able to how to deal with him. And James shows us that. It's one thing about James that I love. James deals with everything that we go through in this life. I mean, everything. In the quick 5 chapters, everything is involved. Because remember, he's not only talking to Christians, he's talking to new Christians, he's talking to Jewish Christians. But remember, these people aren't new to God. They've had God in their whole life. They know about God. Now, they may not have been following Him specifically the way the Old Testament had talked about, which in a sense was wrong, but also in a sense made it easier for them to move forward to the way of Christ. And that's what we see found in them. So let's go and see what we see here as we look at this very first verse. I'll get you, Bill. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger is where we'll be at in a moment. Bill, go ahead.
Okay, every morning I'll read the Landrill. I don't cover back, read the Landrill Constitution and the Wall Street Journal. I hit the high points. But one of my really enjoyable things to read is Dear Abby. Now, if anybody can read Dear Abby, I'm going to admit it, put it on the table. Yesterday, the Dear Abby letter was about someone who had a spouse that they demonstrated their anger by extended quietness.
Yeah.
That is a form of punishment.
Yep.
And that is sadistic. And if you want somebody to be in your life, and you're going to demonstrate anger, not by hollering, what is exactly what you just said, but demonstrate that anger by quietness, rejection, failure to interact, not having anything to do with them, but yet you're still going to physically be in their presence. That is a terrible kind of anger. And it may be worse than an angry outburst because usually those are extended times. You want to know what Dear Abby's advice was?
What?
She said, first of all, the person demonstrating that is anger. Just exactly what you said. So you and Dear Abby are on the same page. Which is not a bad place to be, something. Secondly, she said, you can't live like that. And I mean, she wouldn't make a recommendation other than therapy and see if that can be worked through. But she did identify that as one of the worst kind of angers.
Yeah.
Quiet anger in somebody's presence to punish, to be sadistically withdrawing, and even when that person wants your approval, they want your love, they want your good words, and you see that, and it really goes lockstep with what you're saying right now. It's a bad kind of anger.
It really is, and it's like you said, sometimes you would think the outburst would be easier to deal with because you're getting over with, and to where the others, and I guess it would depend on the outburst. You know, some outbursts can get really bad if someone starts hitting somebody or causing injuries to them. That can get really bad. But it is the quietness. We think, oh, that's not that bad. If you've dealt with it, you know it is. It really is. And we need so James is going to tell us how to deal with that. And he's going to talk about how we move out of that. How do we get out of that area of being a quiet anger or an outburst anger, as we would see. And it starts with these, with these words: quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And if you've ever taken a communication class, anybody at all, the first thing they teach you is how to listen. And because you cannot be a good communicator without listening, it's just not going to happen. And at least I would say, I figure that all the communication classes I've taken, that's how they started it, was with how to listen. And we need to know how to listen, and he's going to talk about that. And it has to do with being quick and being slow in verse 19. Look at verse 19 again. Let every person be what? Be quick to hear and slow to speak. And we see that. If we take that to heart and really think about it, guess what it's going to do with? It's going to teach us how to deal with anger. It really is. James' first direction, as we see in this, is you go, quick to listen, slow to speak, and he says, slow to wrath. In other words, if you do those other two first, wrath is, you're going to be able to see it's coming on and try to control it, is what he's talking about, the anger that is there. So James is teaching us that being a listener moves us in the right direction. That's where it's all at. Somebody that's angry when they're quiet, as Bill was just talking about with Dear Abby, they're not listening. They're not. And and it's hard for you to say, I want to listen when they don't want to listen back. But we see that. So we need to ask ourselves a question. Would people say that we are good listeners? Would people say that of you? Would they say you are a good listener? Do we really hear what people are saying? When it comes down to this, to being a good listener really takes humility. It really does, because you have to pull yourself out of it in a sense and really put yourself in that person of what they're saying, what they're talking about. If we want to genuinely listen to what others have to say, we have to do that. And we have, we can be, too quick to think about, how many times ever happened? Think about what, someone's saying. I've done this myself, and I know others have done it to me, and it's one of those things I worked on, and I still have to work on it, is when someone's talking to me, and they say something, and I'm like, oh, I know about that, and I just want to, I stop listening, and I'm thinking about what I want to say. And they go, yes, what do you think about it? And they say the other, and they go, whoa, that's not the part I asked you about. I asked you about this part. And you're like, oh, I didn't hear that. I wasn't listening. And that's where it comes down to. See, in our society, there's way too much talking, I guess you'd say, not enough listening in our society today. You think about, as we get out there on the internet and so on, and the way things are, it's just everybody wants to tell you their opinion. Everybody wants to talk. And then someone wants to say something, oh, no, I got time for you to talk to you. I just want you to hear what I have to say. And it's one of the ways of dealing with anger is to listen what others have to say. And I think about this slide for a moment. Too often we will draw conclusions too quickly. It happens. We jump to the conclusion is what we see taking place when someone's talking to us, and we want to give our heart. And we need to slow down with that, which brings us to this next thought. Think about this. It is the tendency to make irrational assumptions about people and circumstances. And you see the top part, what if there is another explanation for this? That's why it's so important that we listen, because it's easy to misunderstand people. In today's society, how many here, I know everybody because I text everybody, it's the way we have to communicate at church. How many here enjoy texting? How many here enjoy it, say texting? Okay, how many people here would rather talk on the phone with somebody? Okay, we see hands there. See, I love to talk to people on the phone, I just don't like to talk long. That's the thing. You get 10 minutes, 15 minutes into it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, guess what I stopped doing? I stopped listening. And I'm like, I gotta go. And, it's not that I don't want to listen to them, but I'm like, I want to talk to you. Let's just do this face to face. Because what happens, you talk like that, it's a good thing, but you don't see everything. And that's why I say texting is important. I think it's good because it's quick communication. But at the same time, when people text you, you don't really sometimes know exactly how they're feeling when they do it, what they say. That's why they invented what? The little emoticons, as we see there, to put the emotion with it. Because I've had times when someone's texting me, I was like, what are they mad at me for? I text back, why are you mad at me? I'm not mad at you. How'd you get that from there? When we see that. And that's where that listening, that's where we see jumping to the conclusion, misunderstanding. And it happens also when we're talking face to face. It can happen as we see that taking place in there. Brother Clifford.
Well, in my previous employment, I did a lot of talking. You know, I was like in safety and health, and communication was a big part of my job. And when I got home in the evening, I couldn't wait to go and get my lawnmower, get my tools, and get away from people, and just get out there and be by myself for a while and be quiet. You know, because that's what I did as part of my job, and I looked at it. It's not being angry, but unwinding, kind
Right.
of, you know, just settling down, thinking about what it is that I have to do, and my family and our home and household, what needs to be done there. But I never looked at it as kind of being angry.
Right. And that's not, we do gotta unwind, don't we? We all have to unwind. You know, you work a job, you come home, especially as Brother Cooper was saying there, imagine if you talk in your job all the time. And you think about teachers, you think about, you know, different jobs themselves, different jobs, talking to someone back and forth, whatever it may be. It comes to a point where you've got to get away for a moment. You know, even Jesus, did Jesus ever take a break?
Yeah.
He took many breaks, we see that, and he did that because he knew what the human body needs. And it's the same thing we see today. Mom, go ahead. Do you have a comment?
Me?
Yes.
No, but I'll say something anyway.
Well, okay, you don't know. All right. So, that's just right.
My job, I worked for a CPA for 18 years, and I was front office. And I was on the phone the whole time. I was on the phone and inputting both times, but you know, at the same time. And when I got home, I did not want to talk on the phone, ever.
Which is good, because I didn't like coffee or either. So, no. But yeah, but see, and like Brother Cooper was saying, it's not that you're angry or anything at anybody, it's not what it is. And that's normal. If you were angry, you get home and take it out on somebody. That's what we see happening, and you know, time to time. But as we look at this, you know, it's just like anything. When I worked different jobs in my life, you know, I worked many different jobs, and when I worked for the state with the prison, I try to leave everything there, come home, and just, you know, forget it all and go on. And I was like, man, this thing's so tiring. It's just constant, especially when you become a supervisor there. But then I thought, and then when I decided to preach, I was like, okay, preach, you know, this can be a little easier. And you know, you think about that sense, and you know, after Sunday night, when you taught a class, or you had taught a class Sunday morning, Sunday night, you got done with the day, and you're thinking like, why am I drained? Why am I so tired? And it's because of here. And you know, I think about that when we talk with somebody, if we're not willing to listen and say there is anger building up, you think about how drained you are when if you're in a position, you talk all the time. Imagine when you get angry, you may not even know how angry you're getting of what you're doing, because it's just, and that's it. Or like I said, the quiet part in a mean way, not in a way of just trying to relax, not that at all. And we see that. Dad, go ahead.
There's a big difference between physical tired and mentally tired. You can rest the body, but the brain continues. Even in your sleep, you sometimes do things and act out, and you're not getting that kind of rest. And it's like Brother Clifford says, you know, sometimes you just got to get out and do something.
Yep.
And the 3 points, I think they're all intertwined. For me, the third part where it says slow to anger, that's my issue sometimes, because when anger comes, you stop listening. But if you really concentrate on a person, and you can't really do it on the phone, because what happens when you're on the phone? Oh, I got to do this. You're doing other things while you're talking, and you're not necessarily listening, and you miss a point, and you start jumping to conclusions. So you've got to be swift. What do you got to say? What you've got to say is important to me. What I'm saying to you is important. And if I don't see the eye contact, if I see, you know, this or this, I'm thinking, they don't want to listen to what I have to say. I'm not important. So that part's important. The hearing, the quickness that we need to listen, and then slow to speak. Think about what we're saying. You know, listen to the person first, and then make your comment. And then that third part, for me, the idea of slow to anger means there for me, because I can have issues with that. In my mind, I'm holding back. I'm working on the first two, and I'm holding back. And because I might be silent, doesn't mean that I have an anger against it. I'm just trying to keep on a steady keel, and that's the other two are easy
Right.
to work on. That third one is the hardest.
And I want to point that out, and I think it has been, but you know, when we talk about being quiet, it's one when you're doing it on purpose to be angry with the person. Basically, you're not answering them, knowing it'll make them mad. That's what it's really at, and that's what we see that there's a difference. And you know, we see this listening to others, but at the same time, and I think it's where it helps with that, is we have to listen to ourselves. You know, you have to take time to listen to yourself. And I think as Brother Clifford said there, what helps me with that is I know when I love mowing. And he's like, I love getting out there with my lawnmower and tractor, whatever it is, because my mind gets a chance to just, think about its own things, think about me. And I remember in Virginia, we were there, our house that we bought was in a gated community, and they cut our yards. We didn't do any of it. And I was like, what's going on? I need something. And I started cutting the church lawn. And they're like, the others like, you don't need to do this, Ernie. We'll get started. No, let me do it. It gives me an opportunity to just open up my mind and just unwind. And it does. And we see those things. And so we need to realize we're not only listening to other people, there are times when we know we need to take a step back so we don't get angry, or we need to listen to ourselves and listen to those moments. That's God, in a sense, telling us, reminding us, remember who you are first as a Christian and the way things are. And it does help a lot, doesn't it?
A really good example of this is Jacob and Esau. Because when Esau came in, he sees this food sitting there, and he said, well, I'll give up anything for a bowl of soup, Well, he really never thought that Jacob was going to take him up on it, seriously, and yet Jacob did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he got angry about what he had said, because he jumped to conclusions thinking that, whatever he said was just going to be, words coming out, and somebody wouldn't take it seriously. But then, when he did, then he never I guess he did get over it in the end, but not right then.
Right, and that's exactly right. And so we see all that, it's slowing down, being aware of what is there, and we see that. Mom, go ahead.
Sometimes people think I'm crazy because I'll say, you need to listen to God. You need to be quiet and listen. And that, it's not like God is talking to us
right.
like you and me, but I really believe that you need to be still and listen.
Well, and we're going to see it in a minute. Job was a good example of that, and we're going to see with his life and others. And that's where I believe, that's what I was talking about, we have to listen to ourselves. And, and if I wasn't I've done a lot of counseling, and if I wasn't counseling the Christian way, in a way with God, or, that, I would leave it right there when I'm talking about anger. I would go no farther. I would just leave between the people. But that's not how it works, and brings us right into it. We know that we don't want to, only look at horizontally. We don't only want to look at each other, anger or speaking or quiet and listening and so on. We also want to do it vertically, and that is with God. If we don't have if we're a Christian and we don't have a good relationship with God, it's going to be very difficult to bring that horizontal relationship back with each other. And that's what we see. And so this is what James is getting at. He's reminding them, look, you need to listen to each other. You need to be slow to wrath, slow to anger with each other. But it also all deals with God. If we don't have God first, if we don't think about it this way, it's going to be very difficult to do that. We need to be quick, and this is what was just said, went right into it, Mom. We need to listen to what God is telling us. And someone would say, well, God, that's where you say, great, God talks to you. Well, God talks to me, yes, through His Word, because I know what's in there. I've got it in my heart. And there comes, once again, if we don't read the Word of God, you're not listening to God. We're not listening because there's nothing in our our heart there from His Word, what is found with it. And so God is speaking loudly to us in our hardships. We just need to take time. Here it is, to slow down and listen. To listen what's there. James has already told us at the beginning of the book that God is producing perseverance. Think about this, that God is producing perseverance during our trials. We need to realize before we read this, we're not, well, so we'll go ahead and read this. We'll read this and then I'll say something. James 1:3, please.
For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness.
Thank you. Some verses say patience. We see steadfastness, patience. We all understand that. And what is there with it? And when you think about this, when you bring this out and we realize that God is already saying that is listening to God. That's listening. You're hearing that moment of what is there. So we know that the testing our faith, not that God says, I'm going to test your faith by tempting you with something. God doesn't do things like that in a sense. But everything we deal with in this life, God is saying, if you listen to me, you learn to deal with it better. You learn to deal with it in the way it needs to be dealt with. And we see those things. So as God is producing that, God is working to make us mature. He's working to make us complete. He's working to make us basically, let me think of the next thing, lacking nothing in this life. And we go, wait a minute, how do you lack nothing? It doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean we know the whole Word of God. But what it means is we know enough of the Word of God, and when things come up, we know how to deal with it. And we know how to move forward through it. So as we think about those things, this means we're in trials, that we're lacking something. We need to listen to what God is telling us as we look at those things. These verses here, I've seen many preachers, many religious take verses 19 through 21 out of context, thinking, this is just talking about anger now, and that's all this is here. It is talking about anger, but he's talking about the trials, because it is a trial to deal with anger in this world that we live in. Remember, the world, as we say, the world's not bad. The world is evil in a sense, meaning most of the world is against God. And if you're a Christian wanting to live right, you can see where anger can get in the way if the devil says, hey, I know how to push your button. I know how to get you a little angry, and I'm going to do that. And the devil's going to do it. He's going to try to work on us with everything he can. But here's the great thing. Remember, once again, 1 Corinthians 10:13. That's a temptation, and God says He will not just only not allow us to go but what we can't handle, but He says, I will give you a way of escape.
And James just quoted it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And we see that. How great that is, we find. Any comments for more? Dad, go ahead.
When we talk about what's going on around us, remember the context of this letter. He's writing to the tribes that have been dispersed, the Christians that are dispersed, and they're facing persecution. And they get together and they start talking, and then next thing you know, you got anger going on. But it's a point where you're right. We have to take the time and step back and try to look at the picture. What is this person really trying to tell us? And that's where both the verbal and the nonverbal come in. And you need that. You can't just do it in a text. How many things have you seen blown up out of proportion through a text or a phone conversation? Because you don't see everything. We have to see one another.
And that's exactly, Job's going to talk about that in just a second. I've got the verse 42 where we're going to see that and realize that. So as we think about this, let me think where I was going. My mind just went blank. There we go. All right. As we think about these things, we've seen each other, everything that's out there with anger is, anger sometimes, and this is where we look at this, like I said, sometimes it's okay to be angry if we're doing it right. But the majority of the time we're angry, guess what?
We're not thinking rationally.
We're not thinking rationally. We're not doing it in the right way that God would have it. And that's why it's so important as we see that. Job, rather than listening to what God tells us in our trials, Job was one that spoke out when he wasn't supposed to. We always look at Job. We use Job and go, wow, what an example. What a man that he lost everything, was able to stay right with God. Even though he did, he still had to repent because he spoke when he needed to be quiet. And he gives us that understanding. And Job realized that at the end as he would often very quickly give a rebuttal to God. And God was like, I just want you to listen. You know, you think about what happens today, same thing happened to Joe, same thing happens to us, you know, today. Why is this happening to me, God? And this is when you start getting angry with the wrong person. With who? Start getting angry with God. And you know, this is not fair. Why do I have to go through this? You know, nothing good could come from this, God. Why are you putting me through this? I don't understand what God is doing. Once again, remember, God does not tempt us. So when we look at that, we got to remember, that's not God. When we see those things, how many times have we in our own thoughts, our own minds, argued with God? And we see that and we go, well, I didn't really argue with God. Well, if we go against what he's saying, in a sense we are. And that's what was happening with Job, we see here. That, you know, the argument revealed, you know, what was really going on in the heart at that moment. Does someone have a comment? I saw a hand a second there. Nope. All right. So Job wished that, you know, Job, after doing all this and listening to God, at the end of the chapter, the end of the book of Job, Job wishes, he prays that he goes, I should have been quiet. I should have listened more. And when he says it, it kind of almost sounds like Job's thinking, these temptations would have disappeared quicker. I wouldn't have had to deal with as much as I did. So let's go and see what it says. Job 40. Let's look at Job 40 for just a second. So here, Job promises silence. Now notice, Job doesn't just, you know, say, okay, God, you're right, I'll be silent. He promises it to God. How many of us have ever, you know, got angry, got and promised, God, I'm going to listen to you better. I'm going to listen to your word better. I'm going to do the things that are right. And, you know, when God makes a promise, he's not slacking his promises. What does he do with his promises? He keeps them 100%. How often as human beings do we promise something and we don't keep it? You know, that can happen. And especially when it comes to this situation here. Let's see what Job says. So I'm going to read first Job 40, verses 3 through 5. I want you to notice what he says.
Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further.
Thank you. So Job was, you know, remember, this is at the end. This is at the end of everything. So Job 40, and we see what he's going through, what he's dealing with, and he's thinking, you know, how do I get this? Well, look at the next chapter, 2 chapters over, at the end, Job 42, 1 through 6. And it comes back to what was said a moment ago about singing. And he's so clear about this. If someone go and read this for us, Job 42, 1 through 6, it'll be 2 slides.
Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You ask, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard of you by the hearing of your ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. Thank you.
See, in both cases, Job expresses his sorrow and then his repentance for being quick to speak. And he understood that, you know, and this happens with God, and we say when it happens with each of us, you know, sometimes, and this is the thing about trying to become a good listener, sometimes you don't even need to talk. Have you ever thought about that? All somebody wants is an ear, and you listen. And, you know, I've always said this myself, you know, is that I've gotten better over the years, I think, listening a lot better than I used to be, but I've always been what you would call a fixer. You know what I mean? You know, I want to fix things. And, you know, I want to fix things, and I want to help somebody with something and what's going on there and so on. And to do that, though, you've got to really understand what they're talking about. And it's hard sometimes to just stop and listen. And we all deal with that. And we know, and after we do it, we're like, oh, why didn't I just be quiet for a moment of what was there? So Job learned to place his hand over his mouth. That's what he did. Imagine that. Imagine if you're talking to someone and you go, I know this is going to be really weird. This is going to be really weird for you to see this, but I really want to listen to you, so I'm going to do this the whole time. And you know, and you think that, we think that's bizarre, you think that's funny, and I guarantee the person you're talking to go, wow, that they're really going to listen. You know, and it's like, and you know, you're doing like this, you want to talk, you're grabbing your hand, holding it there. I mean, that's kind of where we see this. So, you know, Job realizes he spoke about things he did not understand. Job repented of what he, you know, what he said to God. And our words need to be asking for wisdom, not words of complaining or challenging the wisdom of God in trial. And that's why, like I said, it's good sometimes just to do this. Just to put our hand there. Sometimes, I know I'll do it. Occasionally, you fight that hand. You're like, no, you're never come in my mouth. I'm going to come and talk. You know, and we see that. And we move in that direction, and we find that happening. Brother Clifford, go ahead.
That's why psychologists, they say, tries to get you to talk and they do all the listening.
Mm-hmm.
If they can just keep you talking, eventually you will solve pretty much your own problem. Or you will identify your own problem. That's what the problem is, if you just keep talking about it. And they talk about a psychologist, he doesn't do very much. He just gets you to talk through what's going on with you. And then he might offer some solutions in the end, or repeat back to you what you said. Could that be a solution? You know, to get you thinking. But yeah, if you could use more patience and be more listening, I think that we'd all be better off. We would be slow to wrath.
Oh, definitely. You know, and that's where it you know, it's as a, you know, when a counselor and counseling somebody, it's, you know, the first thing you're trying to figure out, you know, they tell you what's wrong, but that may not be the problem. That may not be really, you're wanting to get them to talk. And that's why when I counsel people, I'll simply say this for a while, okay. And then I've done that, that's what I say, are you listening to anything I'm saying? Well, I'm not here at all. I hear everything that you're saying. And it does bring things out. And you know, this is what's amazing about God. Sometimes we go, I wish God would just talk to me. Really? Do we really want God to talk to us? Or would we rather know that God is listening to us? Always. God is the greatest counselor. I mean, the greatest, you know, anything listener of all. He wants to hear us. And what happens, I believe, because when we stop talking to God, we got to be careful because anger is going to come in. And we learn that. So that's what we see. I got 4 minutes. We'll move into this next point. And that is, with all these things happening, this is where it brings you to. Slow to anger. Be slow to anger. You know, we see, you know, all of us here drive. And drive where we used to drive, whatever it might be. We know what driving is all about. And we look at that there, and we know what signs are there for. You know, how many of us drive down the road, wherever we drive, we go, I'm not looking at any of the street signs. I'm not looking at anything. I'm not paying attention to it. I'm just going to drive. You know, how crazy would that be? That'd be crazy. You know, you go by the high school over here. What did they add there last year, a year and a half ago, I guess you'd say? That a lot of people, some people still don't realize. What's there now? Anybody know? A speed trap. It's a speed camera, and we see that. And you know, imagine if you're driving and you say, I'm not going to pay attention to the signs. More likely going through there, you're going to be doing faster than 45 when the light is flashing. Well, it's actually 45 without a light, and you see that until you get past the bridge. And so, or the freeway there, whatever it is, the thing goes around us. All right, so as you see that there, and you understand, see, so here's the important. We need to be able to read the signs. We need to be able to read the signs of God. And when people go, well, God doesn't work in that way today. Really? Providentially, God shows us signs. He shows us things. What I mean is how to live and how not to live. And this is one of them. Be slow to anger. And that's what we see in this verse. Let's read it again. We already read one at a time. We'll read before we get to there. Go ahead, Bill.
Quickly, you know, Jesus gave us such a perfect example of this premise in the sense that repeatedly the Sanhedrin, big groups of people, would do their best to provoke him to wrath with a question that was designed to just make him angry. Whatever anger he may have felt, he knew where they were coming from, but I don't know if the right phrase is slow to anger, but his response mechanism was a thoughtful response as opposed to an emotional anger response. But they, in repetition, did everything they could do to provoke an outburst or an angry decimation of the ridiculous question he was being asked. He didn't do it.
Right.
He didn't do it. Let him who was without sin cast the first stone. You know, every response he gave was a measured, might have been angry, but it certainly was under control.
Right, that's exactly right. And it becomes, and I figure it becomes, like Jesus is, well, you have other people learn to do the same. It kind of becomes a habit, and it's a good habit to have. And I know some people that, like me, speak really, really fast, and they did that, and then all of a sudden, one day, they started speaking slower. And I was like, okay, just have a funny day. Did it again, and again, and again. And I asked them about it, and they said, I learned that I used to speak so fast sometimes I didn't even know what I said. It was so quick. And I was saying things in anger that I shouldn't have been saying. I've learned to slow down, and when I slow down, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say before it comes out. And that's hard to do. It's kind of like anything. Once these words come out of somebody, what can you do? You can't retrieve them. My dad used that as an example of when we started hunting, and he told me the hunting first, not the speaking part first. He said, whenever you shoot that weapon, that gun, whatever it may be, once you shoot it, that bullet, you can't retrieve it. You can't grab it. You can't get whatever. And he used that as a perfect example. He said, same thing about your mouth. Is what comes out of it. And how true that is when we think about it that way. So what we're going to do is next week we'll come to here. We're not going to go ahead and read it again, verses 19 to 20, because we're out of time. But this is where James is heading us. He's bringing us this direction of be slow to anger. See, there's the thing. Slow down, and you will probably avoid the anger. And that's we see that happening, and we'll come back to there next week. Well, go ahead.
God gives us all those emotions.
Oh, yeah.
And then I guess it's up to us to learn, how to control them. But that is from God.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's where we see, because, you think back to Adam and Eve in the garden. I mean, we don't, we wonder about them, how they were before, before they ate the tree of knowledge, how it was. But Jesus, once again, we saw anger in Jesus, like I said, but it was a righteous anger. I mean, he knew how to control that, and he didn't go to the next point where he wasn't supposed to. And so we have all these different emotions in us. We just need to know how to control them. Not just anger, everything. We need to know how to control it. Brother Bill.
I know we're quickly coming to the tongue is a little member, a world of fire, a world of iniquity is a fire. But there are multiple ways to demonstrate anger. One of the ways is purely and only with the tongue through harsh words, but certainly actions can demonstrate harsh anger too. So
right.
It kind of touches on what you said about those words that seep out the tongue, fire, the world of iniquity.
That's exactly right. And we'll definitely get there and talk about that. Any other comments or questions before we close? All right, we're going to close there. Thank you for your time.